All right. Getting a good read out there. Cooperative Legacy Project interview number 32, May 3rd, 2006. We're visiting with Loren Zingmark, former general manager of East River Electric Power Cooperative. Loren, where and when were you born?
I was born on September 29th, 1929, on a farm north of Salem.
Okay. And where was your family from originally?
My father was born and raised on the farm that he lived on. Mm-hmm. My grandparents on my mother's side came from Norway, and on my dad's side they came from Sweden.
Okay, Scandinavians.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have one of each.
Okay.
I have a sister, Eunice, that lives in South Sioux City, Nebraska, and my brother Kermit lives in Salem.
Oh, okay.
He used to farm north of Salem.
Mm-hmm. And what was your father's name?
Algot, A-L-G-O-T.
Okay. What sort of person was he? You want to talk about him a little bit?
Yeah, wonderful. A great guy. He served in World War One. He was in...
Maybe we could pull this over.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
He was in the Medical Corps at Camp Dodge, Iowa. And that, of course, was during the flu epidemic back in 1918. Oh. And so he spent his term in the service there. And one of the pictures that was had when he was in the service was they had the human Statue of Liberty. 18,000 soldiers, which is a picture there on the side, which when you think back to 1918 was quite a feat. My dad is standing in the arm, left arm, as you can see the white. Those are Medical Corps soldiers. And so there's never been another picture like that. I have the original one downstairs that my father gave me. He was born and raised on that farm, and he married my mother in 1919, and they lived there. Well, really, my dad lived there till he died, although they had bought a home in Salem, and we were there one Saturday fixing it, painting it, and so on. And he went upstairs and fell backwards and lived till Wednesday, so he really never did get moved into town. Farmed for a long time with horses. One of the last ones to agree that a tractor was here to stay, and hated to see his horses go, because back in those days you traded them in on a tractor. And he farmed, he owned a quarter and a 40 in McCook County. And he also rented some land. And then during World War II, my brother was called in for his physical at Fort Snelling, Minnesota. And by the time he got home, the federal government had authorized farm deferment, and my brother fell into that category because he was farming with my dad. Mm-hmm. And so he did not go into service because of that. But my dad was 70 years old when he passed away. And his parents, my grandparents, founded the Salem, back then they called it the Center Lutheran Church, which is just a couple of miles from where they lived. And then my mother's parents founded the Orland Lutheran Church over here at Orland. So they all have been very active in their church over the years.
Mm-hmm. What was your mother's name?
Hilda. Her last name was Knutson. And she was from Montrose. Her parents had come over from Norway and were farmers at Montrose. My mother, after she graduated from high school, attended what was then the 8 teachers normal here in Madison and got her teacher's certificate, but she never did teach. She became a housewife and mother pretty rather than teaching.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now you grew up out on the farm.
Yes.
What was that like in those days? That would have been primarily in the 1930s and.
It was in the 30s. Of course, I remember the dirty 30s real well.
How was that around there?
Bad, very bad.
Yeah.
For 2 years, we never moved the binder. Back then, it was the binder off the spot. There was no small grain. We would, of course, everything was open pollinated corn, and so in the low sloughs where you might grow a little, we picked the ears mainly for heat, and might have a few hogs to feed, but the WPA, when Roosevelt come in, to me anyhow, was sort of the savior of our area anyway, because my dad had a chance to go out and use his horses and a dump wagon and build township and county roads. And I remember getting baskets of fruit from the government, and never went to bed hungry.
Yep.
Never was hungry. Never knew we were poor, because everybody else was. Same shape we were. But we survived it, and probably learned a lot of good lessons from it.
What are some of your early memories on the farm besides that?
Oh, I don't know.
Did you have regular jobs you had to do, or?
Chores, that was kind of a common thing. Take care of the hogs. I did milking quite a bit. But far as the farming in itself was concerned, my dad and my brother did most of that.
Your brother
because I was in school.
Was somewhat older than you.
Oh, yes, yeah. My brother is 7 years older than I am.
Okay.
And my sister's about 1.5 years older than I am.
What looking back to then, what did you want to do?
Farm.
You wanted to farm. Almost everybody seems to have wanted to farm.
I wanted to farm. The problem was there was no way I could do it.
Yep.
Because my brother had already bought quite a bit of his own machinery, and he had rented land, and then he'd bought a quarter of land. And so between he and my father, there wasn't room for another one, so to speak. And so I had to decide on what else to do. I worked at gas stations in Mitchell, and I went into the service when I was 18, and I had an enjoyable time. I must say, that first hitch. I thought I was going to be in the meat business. That's where I had worked in the locker plant in Salem when I was going through high school for a wonderful couple by the name of Krugeners. And when I got out of high school is when I decided I'd go and serve a hitch in the Army. And I had to sign up for 5 years in the reserves to get by with just 1 year of active duty. And so I did that.
You didn't get called up during the Creed?
Yes, I did.
You did, okay.
Yeah, I got called up. I got called to Fort Lewis, Washington. And I injured my back out there, and I spent about 4 months in the hospital, about 2 out there, and then they transferred me to the neurological center at Battle Creek, Michigan. My wife will get it. I don't know how soon. I guess she's got it. And That was a hospital that the Kellogg Company had turned over to the federal government to use as a hospital. And after many evaluations, why I ended up getting a medical discharge, an honorable medical discharge.
Okay. I'm going to go backwards a little bit in time. We have sometimes end up bouncing around a little bit. Did you, where did you attend school at?
Salem. First 8 years, it was a country school.
Country school.
Yeah.
Okay. What country school was that?
Center.
Center.
Yeah, there's a little community we call the Center community. Mm-hmm. It had a store. They bought cream and eggs and sold groceries, and we had a trucker, a taxidermist in this little community, and that's where my home church is.
Okay.
And this big store is gone. They
mm-hmm.
have a little building there now, or I think somebody from Sioux Falls has it for kind of like a summer retreat.
Okay.
And the trucker, of course, he's no longer there.
Mm-hmm.
And also the parsonage of the church is there. The church has pretty much a full quarter of land that they bought back in the early days. Mm-hmm. And that has helped them keep the expenses going in a little rural church.
Sure. What was school like?
Of course, back then we thought it was terrible. Mm-hmm. But as you look back, you realize how fortunate you were to have good teachers. My mother's cousin taught us for at least 5 out of the 8 years. And she was very strict, but she was very good. And when you stop to think about, they taught music, they taught math, they taught English, reading, writing, 8 grades. And normally we always had 8 grades in our little school. And when I graduated from there, I went to the Salem High School and graduated from there.
Okay. And Salem, what was that like in those days? That would have been, what, about 19...
I think I graduated in 1947, if I remember right.
Okay. So you would have been in school at least part of the time during World War II.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't remember how large our class was, but we also had St. Mary's. Mm-hmm. That had a grade school and a high school back then, just like they did here in Madison.
Yeah.
And they both were very successful. Mm-hmm. But again, as you know, as time goes on, merger comes facing them. Yeah,
yeah. We talked a little bit about the 1930s and the difficulties out on the farm. Then things got a little bit better in the 40s.
Yeah.
During the war.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was things like for your family during the war years?
Well, we had a lot of rationing, of course, and but the farmers got, you might call it a break, but for example, they could buy tires for their cars or their pickups or trucks because of food production. And also gas. You could buy gas for your tractor. Where if you lived in town, or as me as a student, as a kid, I had my own car. I couldn't do that, so I burned a lot of kerosene back in those days, and I had a 35 Ford to put my dad's tires on it when I wanted to go too far because mine were getting pretty thin. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't all that bad. I worked in the meat market also during those days, or during World War II. And we had rationing there, and we had price controls. Mm-hmm. And I guess one of the things that surprised me the most, because we basically never sold it, and that was sweetbreads. Beef sweetbreads was the highest priced thing on the price control.
Wow.
And I don't know why, other than there's not very many, of course, on a critter. But no, we managed. And of course, back in those days, in the meat market business, why We butchered our own. That is, we butchered we had a locker plant, and we butchered for farmers and city people as well. They'd buy from the farmers. And we would have our own, my boss had his own federal inspection approval, so he could stamp, whether it was back in those days choice or what have you, and put that in the counter. It was very successful. Of course, he being German, he and his wife were Germans, and me being a Sweden and Norwegian, I loved lutefisk, and of course he had to sell it. Didn't have much choice back in those days, but the 50-gallon barrel would be outside. He wouldn't allow it inside. So if somebody wanted it, well, you had to go outside and get one out of the lie and make sure you had plenty of paper on the scale so that if the next person wanted a pound of hamburger, then he didn't get lutefisk on it. But they were all right. We didn't suffer that much. Sure, we went without, but I'm not too sure the people today are going without with this nasty war we got going on now. The Bush War, I call it.
Yep. How long was it after the war before the price controls went off?
Oh, I couldn't tell you that. It was not very long, I don't think, if I remember right. But I'm not really sure what the period was when price controls went off.
I think just last week, John Kenneth Galbraith died. And I think
yes,
he was in charge of price controls.
Well, was he? I saw where he just passed away. Yeah. He was quite a gentleman.
Yep. 97, I believe.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
And did you go to college at all?
No.
You didn't?
Nope.
Okay. So you do your little stint in the military, and you're home again. What did you do then?
When we were out at Fort Lewis, we had friends out there, and he is still living here in Madison. He's 90-some years old. He was a military man. Spent like 30 years. And he said, there is a new outfit coming into Madison by the name of East River. And he said, Loren, when you get home, whenever you get discharged, I'd sure look into that. Well, when I got home, I did look into it. They were in Sioux Falls, and there was 3 gentlemen here in Madison. Wes Green owned the hotel. George Hunter from the Daily Leader, and Ernie Frederickson, who he might have still been in the automobile business. I think he was, yeah. They had invited the East River Board. Back in those days, only 9 members. And Burge Hanlon was not really the manager yet, but he was, he was then. Yeah, he was. I was going to say he was the coordinator. But he was the manager then. They invited him to come up here and showed him Madison, and Ernie Frederickson had this building that he would sell for $50,000. I think that's the price. And the board was impressed and decided we're moving out of Sioux Falls, and so they came to Madison. And that was in May, I believe, of '51. And then I applied for a job. Cliff Guernsey was the office manager, and I got it, and I think I went to work around June 13th of '51.
Okay, and that wouldn't, East River wouldn't have been very old when they moved out here.
No. I think they organized in '49. The old minutes would show it, and Harlan probably has it in his book. It's been so long since I read it. No, they were very young. About all they owned was some office equipment, and I think Mr. Hanlon had an old Ford car that belonged to East River, and that was the size of the utility system. And when I went to work for them, the largest department, two of them, I guess, would be the accounting department and the right-of-way department. Virgil Horner, who was one of Mr. Hanlon's first employee, wasn't the first, but right up next to Hugo Tice was the first employee that Mr. Hanlon hired. He was in charge of material, and he had been in the construction business, and so he hired him as his material. I think he called him material coordinator, but I could be wrong on that. And started ordering materials, and then I became a material clerk. I did everything. I was, I did payroll. Back in the old days, I was Mr. Hanlon's secretary for a few years. File clerk, you name it. I was out on the line in emergencies during ice storms and that kind of thing. And then we did remodel the building. Part of it, about half of it maybe. And Tuffle Iron Fields, they were the contractors that did that. And I was very fortunate. I was able to, I wanted to go to college. I had 4 years of free college coming from the service. Mr. Hanlon didn't think I should do that. I still wish I would have. Hindsight's always 20/20. But I had all kinds of opportunities that he gave me. And then in '61, the manager's position was open in D. Smith, Kingsbury Electric, and I applied for that. Mr. Hanlon thought that would be good experience for me, and so I did, and I got it, and had an excellent board, had an excellent staff. They were in a union negotiating problem, and we finally got that resolved. But I had an office manager by the name of Phyllis Tashner. She was just as good as you could ever wish for. And Maury Borkstadt, he was my superintendent, line superintendent. Mm-hmm. And so that was the problem we had was housing. Couldn't find anything to rent, not even to buy. But we did live in an old house that first winter, and I always referred to it as a corn crib because, oh man, the wind came through those windows and everything, I had 3 little children, and snow came in. Reminded me of my young youth, So the co-op board finally decided they'd build a house for the manager, and I'd rent it, and which I did. And then, and it was an all-electric house back then. They had the lighting, it was all the latest in lighting from GE. And then I got a call from Mr. Hanlon one night, wanting to know if I would come down and visit with him. And so I did the next night, then met with him out to the lake, his lake home. And he asked me if I'd like to come back on his staff. And I was tickled to death to come back. Mm-hmm. Although I enjoyed being there at D. Smith. I had no complaints at all. Mm-hmm. And so I came back then as the administrative assistant.
Okay. Now you mentioned your family out there. When did you get married?
Got married May 7th, 1950.
Okay. And your wife's name is?
Phyllis.
What was her last name?
Goodhughes.
Goodhughes. Okay. And kids?
3. Okay. My oldest boy is I guess he's 51. Dennis. They just live over here about 3 blocks. They got 2 little boys. They're 11. I call them little, and they're not little anymore. They're 11 years old. And then I have another son, Terry. He has the Enterprise Auto Repair Shop over here in town. Married to Donna. And Donna had a 12-year-old boy when They were married, so we had a 12-year-old grandson right off the bat. That was the first one, grandchild. And then our youngest is Robin, our daughter. Her husband is a building contractor, and they just live west of town a mile.
Okay.
Just half a mile west of the F&M oil station. And she has two girls, 10 and 6.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Looking back when you were first working at East River, what were the main issues you were dealing with at that time? The local co-ops had electrified the farms in this part of the state by then, pretty much, hadn't they?
Well, yes, they had. But the problem was getting power to them. Mm-hmm. When we started East River, there was not a pole in the air when I started working for East River. And we had Cooperative Electric out of Nebraska, got several. They were broken down into district type contracts, or an area, I guess you might say. Mm-hmm. And one of the first segments of line we built was from Sioux Falls to Mount Vernon. And that was, back then, was huge. It was a 4/0 line, and that's not very big today. And Northern States Power built a 50 megawatt diesel plant. And East River had contracted for the output of that. And when we got to Mount Vernon, then we got on to the Bureau of Reclamation's 115 kV line, and one as far north as Groth. But everything was pretty much hinged on that 4/0 line from Sioux Falls to Mount Vernon. Now, back in those days, inspectors were kind of zeroed out. You just didn't have very many. And so a conductor of that nature, you have is a steel core in the center of all the aluminum. And that steel core then is crimped on with a sleeve. The sleeve isn't very long, probably 4 to 6 inches long. And that's what holds the line together where you have a splice. You have it on reels and you have to splice it. Then you take an aluminum sleeve and go on the outside of that. So now your power is going from this segment of line that came off the roll or the reel through that sleeve on the outside and keeps on going. Well, what happened was the contractor did not have that aluminum one centered. And you can't see it. You can't see it. It's all covered up. And so what was happening is that it was so far to the end that the power started going into that steel core and burning off the steel core, and the line went down. Went down one Christmas Eve. And we just had a terrible time. And it finally got to the point where we decided we'd have to take every one and redo it. And so we got a big magnet from SDSU. And so back then we didn't have a bucket truck, but we had a ladder truck that you just put this extension ladder on top of, or back into the truck and went up. And they would use that magnet on each one of those splices, and they could tell where that steel core was inside. And so those that were centered, it's fine. But those that were way off, we had to take it all apart and start over again. So those were some real trying times back then. And then, of course, as time went on, we built more line. Most of it was 69,000 volt line, which is not, it's still a common voltage, but then Jeff is on your advisory board, and he can tell you what they have now, because now it's much different than when I was there and when we started up. But then we finally got some Bureau power, and we that line that went to Groton, that 115 line, it also went down to the Charles Mix area, and there was a 115 volt sub there. And so at Fort Randall, then we tied in with hydropower. And so that was the first, and there's a picture of that down at East River where Alfred Pugh, who was the president of the board then, threw the first switch to get hydropower into East River system. Quite a day.
Yeah.
Quite a day for us, yeah.
Now, what percent of the power needs did that supply initially?
Oh, back then it was 100%.
Okay, but you had to be thinking about what we're going to do in the future.
Yeah. And of course, back then also is that the more you used, the greater your allocation would be at the end. And so, Mr. Hanlon would say you could give away a dryer, electric dryer, free. Give away an electric range, free. Because you get paid millions of times over when that final allocation is made, because it's going to be based on what your consumption was. And we had, Harlan Severson headed up that department for a while. It was the Member Services Department. And then we hired a guy by the name of Bill Matson. Where did Bill come from? Belfouche, I think.
I think I've met him.
I think you have too, yeah. Yeah, if you've been in the cooperative movement very long, you ran into Bill Matson somewhere along the line. He's been gone quite a while now. But anyway, we'd call him Old Smelly, and we'd have the ads would show where the cat was crushing Old Smelly out in the dump grounds, and what have you. And so, and of course, Mr. Hanlon's absolutely right, because we did end up with a pretty good allocation. But we knew that it would grow, and of course, back in those days, not when we started, but when I became general manager, we were losing farms. They were beginning to sell out, and their neighbors would buy it and get larger and larger, and we were really struggling trying to see how we could keep our loads at least where they were, and try to get them growth. Well, of course, nowadays, I'm not sure in some areas if the rural load isn't the smallest. I really believe that. I just read it. I thought it in Sioux Valley's newsletter, where the non-agricultural part of their load is getting smaller and smaller, percentage-wise. Of course, the ethanol plants that they have, that helps add to. I'd like to connect that to rural load, But, for example, there's that new, I still don't understand what it is, but it's a big industry just on the northwest corner of Sioux Falls, right on Highway 38, or 42, no, 38. And the East Rivers built a new substation there. The Heart Hospital is a co-op load. And so much of their load now is going that way. And so East River has, they have built so much and upgraded over their 69 volt transmission line. Now it's up to 115. And of course they had 230. We had 230 when I was managing too. And they've had to, make tie lines to try and make sure that their continuity of service is going to be good. And their continuity of service has been real good, although this ice storm just really raised havoc. So much of the area is the worst, much worse than I ever experienced while I was working for East River. We had them, but we didn't have anything like that.
Yeah, certainly the worst I've seen since I lived in here.
Yeah, just unreal.
Multiple days down in
that
town.
new line that they built for that turkey plant, everybody here, and I don't think they'd been energized more than a couple of 3 months. The whole thing went down. Yeah. A tornado, I'd rather have a tornado than an ice storm, because it just takes a section out of your, and the weather normally is not quite so cold.
Mm-hmm.
So those people really went through hell for a while. They really did.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about the amount of power needed today as opposed to what it had been. Is that one of the issues earlier on was the question of territory between where the lines were between who was serving a particular area, and that still seems to be a concern. I know at Huron, who was going to serve the turkey plant was an issue.
Yes. I'm not sure what the law is now, Chuck, but when I finished up and retired, why a municipal could extend their system anywhere they wanted to and serve the load, because it too was a consumer-owned utility. The power company was different then. But if the load was so large, and Jeff can tell you on this, the load was so large it was up for bids. And I think that's probably the case yet today if the turkey, because I even know on the ethanol plants, I believe there's one out by your way out there, by here in Tulare, is it? Where it went to the power company. One of them has gone that way. Anyway, they got a contract. I read that in East River's newsletter. Mm-hmm. And so I think those go to bids. Because I know the ethanol plant over here at Wentworth, the Otter Tail Power Company, I think, submitted a proposal for that load as well as Sioux Valley. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Of course, one of the biggest concerns was where to get that other power you figured you were going to need early on to supplement the hydroelectric power. Do you want to talk about your take on the struggle to get base and electric established?
Yes, East River first is going to build a plant up near the Mobridge area. And it seems to me like we had a partial loan for that. But then, of course, Art Jones then was our president. And Vert Hanlon thought that a better way of going would be for a whole area to join together and have a generating cooperative. Because there's no doubt that size, the larger the unit, the lower the cost per kilowatt hour. And of course, lignite coal, as you know, is not the number one coal in the world. You can't really afford to haul it very far because you're hauling a lot of clinkers and water. And so they decided, with the help of Ken Holm and many others, that the ideal thing to do would be to try and get a group of cooperatives together, G&Ts mainly to start with, and build a power plant on the lignite fields. And of course the environmental restrictions weren't as great back then as they are today. And so we got a number of cooperatives, NIPCO out of Lamar's, Iowa, Elano over here in Iowa, and East River. We had several of them in North Dakota. Rushmore was one out west. Anyway, they all decided, let's go together and see what we can do. And so they did, and REA looked very favorably upon it. And, of course, Ken Holm, having served as the Assistant Secretary of Interior, had a great deal of knowledge on how to put coal and water together. You got to have both. And he knew water law from... He forgot more about water law than certainly I'll ever know. And so they then decided they needed a manager. And I can't tell you how Jim Groth got involved in that, because Jim Groth was the assistant manager of APPA at the time.
The American Public Power
American
Association.
Public Power Association, yeah. And Alex Radin, he was Alex Radin's assistant. And so they hired him. And Jim Groth told me more than once, he said, after they did it, I threw my arms up and why in the world did I do now? You know, he said, I didn't know anything about a power plant. But he knew how to put a tremendous staff together. And he did that. And he was a man of deep conviction. And of course, you know, you deal with not directors but managers. You deal with a group of managers like myself. We all know everything, and you get those together, and thank God there was a guy by the name of Jim Groth that stood his ground, especially when we built the Laramie River plants, because I was one of those committee members then, because I was managing Heartland Consumers Power District back then. And he was a man of iron, I guess I would say. And you might disagree with some of it, but I don't know who else could have put that kind of a program together, get that many people together. And he did a great job. He really did. And like I say, he had a tremendous staff.
Yeah. There was some conflict between who was going to get the loans for that.
Well, it's with Heartland, I think you're referring to, are you?
There was. I know I'm originally from northeastern North Dakota, and we were served by Dakota up there.
Oh yeah, but Dakota didn't join.
No.
Basin. They have their own Milton Young plant.
Yeah, they were looking for the big loan and to do things their way.
Yeah. There was, once it got started, why there was always those that, and Dairyland Power was another one that was involved in it.
Yeah.
I knew those managers real well, and we used to. They probably still have it called the G&T Managers Association of the United States, and I was a member of that, and that always gave us an opportunity to meet with those guys at least once a year and to hassle it over. And then there was also Corn Belt down in Iowa again. George, what was his last name? I can't think of his last name now. They didn't want any part of Basin. They wanted to go it themselves, and so yeah, it was quite a tussle. But then they, of course, we all, not Basin, we did. East River did. L&O, all of them did. Make their projections, what their power consumption they project is going to be. Well, between all of them, I think they were looking at about a 7% annual increase. And so then Basin decided to build the Antelope Valley stations in North Dakota, and the load just fell right off the deep end. And so here they sit with 2 power plants, no load. But, like again, I go back to his staff. They worked diligently with Montana Power, with Bonneville. They got power flowing out that way and down into Northern California. And so, I'd go to a manager's meeting and there'd be those who would just really criticize Jim Groth and those plants. And I'd keep saying, hey, wait a minute, the day is going to come when you're sure as hell going to wish that you had them. Or be happy that you got them.
Yeah.
Well, I think they are now not only happy that they got them, but they are going to look now at other units. And the last Basin newsletter I get one every week from Basin, is that they are looking at joint ventures with others, like Dakota is one, for example.
Virgil Hanlon died suddenly in 1969.
Yes.
That was quite a shock to the system. He wasn't that old, was he?
No, he's only 59.
59, yeah. And he had been the only general manager.
The only general manager of East River.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. His wife called us one night, and his nickname was Bugs to her.
Mm.
She always called him Bugs. Well, we would never call him anything but Mr. Hanlon, you know. And she said, Bugs went out fishing and never came back. Would you come out? So we went out to they were out to their lake home. And I got a hold of another couple of employees, and they got a hold of a raft. And they got one of East River's small standby generators, and hooked up a bunch of floodlights and went around the lake. And then Norm McGilvery was sheriff, and he came up to the door and wanted to see me. And we were out to Hanlon's. We were there all night.
Mm-hmm.
And wanted to know if I'd come with him because they had found a boat that come up on shore over Harris. And I said, sure. So I went over there, and sure enough, it was his boat. And it never stopped running. The prop had made a hole in the sand, and the water was running into that sand, so the motor kept on running.
Okay.
It was a brand new motor that his wife had bought for him for Father's Day.
Hmm.
And although this is May.
Yeah.
And then the next morning, they found him floating up on the south edge of the lake. You know. And he had had a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And although that's where he wanted to go, fishing.
Yep.
When Wes Green died, one of the three, he died hunting, and Verge Hanlon told his wife, well, he said that's the way he wanted to go. I want to go fishing. And so he buried out here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so you were selected to replace him?
Yes, that was in May, and Art Jones was wondering if they had to do something right after the funeral. Mm-hmm. And the staff all said, no, Art, you don't have to worry about it. So come the June meeting, then they selected me as their acting general manager.
Mm-hmm.
And then solicited applications.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first Thursday in December, I forget what day it was, but then I was elected as the general manager, but of course it has to be approved by REA before it becomes final. And they approved it. Well, I shouldn't say they approve it. They have the right to disapprove and not accept it. And of course, if they don't, well, you're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
But during that summer, the year before that, we had submitted a loan to REA, a loan application.
Mm-hmm.
We just couldn't get it off dead center at all. I couldn't tell you how many trips I went in. I'd fly in the morning, fly home at night with it. And I got a picture of the signing of Dave Hamill on it. So anyhow, I forget, I think it was around September, the officers decided they'd go in with us, and we had Walt Canny and Harlan Severson and I think were the only three on the staff. But then we had all the officers of the board. So we went to, which was the area director back then, and still couldn't get it off the ground. It was just nothing but one damned excuse after another. And of course, what it boiled down to, they didn't want to give East River a loan, period. Hanlon was gone now, and didn't have to worry about him anymore.
And this was Nixon administration?
Yes, under the Nixon administration,
Who was the REA administrator under Nixon?
Dave Hamill.
Okay. Yeah.
He served under two presidents.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyhow, when we finally got done, then we decided we'd go up and see Senator Mott. And we did, and we told him the whole story. And of course, Bob McCoy is here. That was Senator Mott's AA. He's here. He's in the home down here, but he was a good friend of mine. And I had kept Bob up to date on our problems. So anyhow, we went into Senator Mott about 11 o'clock maybe. And he got on the phone, and only like Carl could do, Dave, This is Carl Munt here from South Dakota. My good friends from my hometown of Madison are here from East River and want to know what's happening to their loan. Oh, I see. Well, okay. So he hung up and he said, why don't you be back in my office at 4 o'clock? So 4 o'clock came and we're back up to Senator Munt's office. Oh, just a minute. On the phone. Dave, Carl Munt here. Oh, well, wonderful. That's just wonderful. Thank you. And he hung up and he said, the loan is on the administrator's desk to be signed, and he'll sign it at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to be there. Yeah. And so we're all gathered down at the administrator's office, Dave's office, and Munt's not there. By God, he wouldn't sign it. He said, I will sign this loan when your senator gets here. Well, of course, about 15 minutes later, here Carl comes bouncing in with Bob McCoy, and I think he had one other staff member with him. We took the pictures, and he signed the loan. And it was just amazing that just in 5 hours, all that material was on his desk ready to be signed. And we had spent almost 2 years at it, trying to get it approved.
Yep. We've talked about some of these folks, but my next questions are just to ask you to talk a little bit about some of the people that have been involved. Art Jones, for example, who had been long involved before you took over there.
We started with a 9-member board, as I pointed out, and Alfred Pugh from Millbank was the president. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we had Sam Ulrichson from down that area, and Bill Robbie. We had Warner Boyd here, just living next here in town. Mm-hmm. And the first one was a guy by the name of C.W. Stitt from Huron that was also on the board, but he passed away rather suddenly, and I didn't think I'd ever forget his name, from Cahors, took his place. Anyway, then and Max Farrar from down there at Hurley was on it, and we decided, or I shouldn't say we, they decided that it would be in the best interest of East River if we had one director from each member cooperative. Mm-hmm. And so they changed the bylaws then to allow that.
Yeah.
And so.
And then a bigger board.
Yeah, it started out then at 21. We had 21 member systems. Mm-hmm. And then our bylaws got changed that a municipal could become a member of East River. But that director had to be re-elected every year, and it had to be the mayor of the municipal, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. So Elk Point's the only one that did that. But Elk Point had a superintendent back in the old days that didn't want any federal power. And so they didn't hardly get anything. And they just had the little small diesel plant in the city of Elk Point, so they joined East River so they'd have an ample supply. And then we took on, let's see, did we have Lion Lincoln then? No, we took on Lion Lincoln. We took on another one in Minnesota, and then we took on FEM up there, and Hawaii. So I had 25 directors.
Was that a little bit unwieldy? Did you have an executive board, or did they all meet every time?
We met every month. Now I think Jeff has some by phone, or probably other means of communications. Yep. We didn't have that available to us back then. No, it really wasn't. I just never had any problem with a 25-man board. We had some real discussions that, in my opinion, didn't rest so much on the issue as personality that was involved. And of course, the Hawaii Irrigation District got into play, as you might know. Yeah. That sort of got into play just as soon as I became general manager. Yeah. But yeah, Art Jones was the president for, well, Alfred Pugh voted I don't want to. Alfred Pugh was not re-elected at his home board, and so Art Jones then was elected president from Britain, and then after I became general manager, I don't know, a couple of 3 years, well, Art decided he didn't want that position any longer either, and so then Virgil Fodness from Lennox.
Yeah.
And he was my president till I retired. And then Burge did not run for re-election. They had a merger down there at Lincoln Union and Turner Hutch. And so then Burge didn't run for re-election. And then, from out there at northwest of here. His father was on my board.
Fritzie.
No.
No?
Ed Fritzie was the vice president. No, Ed Fritzie was president for a while.
Yeah.
You're right. Ed was president. He was vice president and became president after who? Burge Fodness? Or Art Jones? I forgot all about that. He wasn't president very long, I don't think, for many years.
Yeah.
And then Burge Fodness was on for a long time. And he took Sam Ulrichson's place on our board. And Sam, age caught up with him like it does to all of us.
Yeah, he also served on the Farmers Union board.
Yes, he did. And he was on the SDRA board too. Yeah.
Ken Holm, you mentioned him before, but certainly...
Great friend. Should have been senator. I had to take one of the employees' wives up to Webster that night of the election, because her husband had an emergency appendectomy surgery up there, and he was an employee of East River. So I got my car and I'm listening to the radio, and Ken is just doing great. And now I goes to the west of the river, and I thought, Ken, you got it made finally. By gosh, I'm just going to sit back and take a nap, because it must have been about 4 o'clock in the morning or something. I woke up at 6, and here he had lost. I couldn't believe it. I was just sick. He's one of the finest men that ever walked the face of the earth. And he really would have been good senator. But boy, I'll tell you, you got to have one heck of a spread if you're going to carry West River on the Democratic ticket.
Yeah. Bob Partridge, I think he was still...
He was the head of the NRECA.
When I started at Farmers.
Oh, was he? Yeah. And then I think following him was... from Minnesota.
Bob Berglund.
Bob Berglund, yeah. He was a nice person. He was, and it wasn't my fault, but they had the 50th anniversary of REA, here in Madison. I had nothing to do with that. I got a call at the regional meeting down at Sioux Falls from Senator Abner, telling me that it was going to be held in Madison. So that was that, and that's the picture that was on the program.
Okay.
That's where I was born and raised.
Oh, all right.
That's my home place. I didn't know how to get a picture of a farm place, as I got one. Do you remember Larry Green?
Yeah.
Well, he's the one that did the painting.
Yeah.
Or was it Larry, or was it his son?
John.
John did it. Yeah, John did it. Yeah. But Larry's the one that took the pictures of it. And how I happened to get it is that when I was telling you, my folks were going to move into town, and I wanted a painting of the old farm for Dad to have when he was in town. Well, he never got into town, so I ended up with a painting.
In the early 1970s, the Nixon administration had some ideas about that would have been damaging to
they put it under.
Virgil Fodness talked about that a little bit when I interviewed him.
Yeah, they put it under a different program.
Yeah, he talked about going in there and getting aroused by Hubert Humphrey.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, they did, but Dave Hamill, he was going to be able to work it out without any problems whatsoever. And of course, Dave was a good politician.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good person too. Dave was.
Mm-hmm.
I think he served on the advisory board at Basin when he retired. He was a rancher over there in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I think he was on Basin's advisory board of some kind. I forget now, or he received some award from Basin. I don't recall. Yeah, it was. And I didn't even know about it. I got a call from Kelloland wanting to know about it, and I had never even heard of it yet. But it evidently came over the wire that he was going to put it. Where in the world was he going to put it? Under rural development? Would that have been right? I'm not
That's
sure.
where it ended up at.
Yeah, okay.
20-some years later.
Yeah. Yeah, it's much different now.
Yeah.
It's not even rural electrification anymore.
No.
It's RUS.
Mm-hmm.
Rural Utility System or something like
Yeah.
that. And I think they make sewer loans and that kind of thing now too, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, Dallas Tonsauger was the state director here when they made that shift from Farmers Home Administration. They took those kind of loans, and some of their farm loans then went over to Farm Service, which was replaced ASCS.
Oh, okay.
Which kind of Dallas wanted it because he wanted to have the farm loan program, but he ended up with rural development, and the farm loan program went over to the other office,
Mm-hmm.
and that would have been about 95, I think, or 94, something like that.
Yeah.
Not very long after those guys went into the Clinton administration. One of the things I remember when I started with Farmers Union was the activity in the Consumer Federation of America. How soon did East River get involved in that?
Real
Virgil
early.
Was like a vice president of that.
Yeah, real early. Yeah, he was. He was on the board for a long period of time, and he was vice president. I think Bill Matson was president at one time. Yeah, we did, because the Consumer Federation of America, although we didn't agree on everything, were a good supporter of rural electrification. They really were. And Verge took a very active role on the board when he was president. Yeah, he sure did.
Mm-hmm. I remember going to the White House for their 10th anniversary. That was
Is that right?
In the White House.
Oh, great! Yeah.
Me and Gene Hexum was in on that.
Oh, okay.
And probably Virgil, I suppose, was.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I would guess so.
Yeah. Certainly, one of the leading state issues that did impact some on rural electrics in the 1970s was water and the Oahe project, which and
that one.
Yeah, both of those. Would you like to talk a little bit about the Oahe battles first, and then maybe Etsy after that?
Well, I still would have liked to see the Oahe irrigation project go through, and I can appreciate why some of those farmers didn't want that to come through their land, and I really think that the Bureau did kind of a poor job of planning. Certainly did a lousy job of PR. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't think they would ever get turned around, but they did. They stopped it. And what do they call it? Farmers? They headquartered out of Huron, didn't they?
Yeah.
I was trying to think. Yeah, I met with them so many times. They thought that the only reason that East River was interested in it was because of the sale power for irrigation, which was not the case at all. Mm-hmm. We just thought it would have a great impact on the farm economy, and that would certainly be good for East River, for everybody. Mm-hmm. Because even today around here, if it weren't for the farm economy, we'd fold up. This town would. Not sure about Sioux Falls, but we would. Yeah. And so it got shot down, and it caused so many hard feelings. And I don't know where anybody is at anymore. I know Bob Johnson I think he's still alive, is he not?
Yes,
Up
in
there at
fact, I interviewed.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
He got caught right in the middle of that, of course, up at Aberdeen.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of, to me, it was kind of a black day for rural South Dakota.
Yeah, yeah. Ben, my boss, was a big supporter of it.
Yes, yeah, he was. And, any time that you do something like that, why, some gain and there are those that lose. And in this particular case, why the gainers couldn't outdo the losers. So it was too bad.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, the other one was the Etsy fight.
Yeah.
And we opposed that to start with because, well, just to give you an example.
You want to talk a little bit about what they proposed to do there?
At Etsy?
Yeah.
They proposed to take water out of Missouri and send it out to Wyoming and make a coal slurry pipeline down to Texas from there.
Right.
And I don't think I have it anymore, but I used to have a bottle of it. It was just like powder, like face powders, how they ground it up. And I thought there was 2 plants like that in the United States. I know that there was one, but they've shut it down. Environmentalists have shut it down. And that's the one at Laughlin, Nevada. That is a coal slurry pipeline. The coal and the water comes from the Navajo Nation, and it's all pumped underground all the way from there to the plant. And the plant then would separate, keep the water for cooling and dry the coal for burning. But they would not put any scrubbers or anything in it, so the environmental community decided that they were going to ruin the Arizona Gorge up through there, through the Colorado River.
Yeah.
So they shut it down. I think it was shut down around January 1st this year. Is when we were up there the last time. Well, it wasn't running.
Yeah.
And I thought there was one other one like that. But anyway, we managed to managed in their deal to give us so much for the loss of revenue because of loss of generation. And to give you an example of what happens is the lawyer for Midwest Electric. When McCullough wanted to dredge a channel on the Colorado River at Havasu, why, he was Ken Holmes, what do they call him in the federal government? Ken Holmes, lawyer, but Solicitor General for Ken Holmes. And so he negotiated that opening of that channel, digging of that channel, with McCullough. And I didn't know this. He was telling me about it out at Midwest meeting one time. And I said, well, what's there to negotiate? He says, well, he said, you're going to have that much more evaporation on that river when you open up another channel. And he said, and there's still one more dam down there that's generating power. And we're going to lose some of that. Well, that's what our argument was here. That you take that water out of there, water's energy, And so we were able to reach an agreement with Etsy, but then, of course, the railroad stopped it. So
certainly in conditions like drought, like we've had lately.
Yeah. Certainly didn't need to take water out of there for coal for Texas. Let them use their own oil. Yep. They've got a president and vice president should be able to find enough oil for them.
Let's talk about some politicians that you had to deal with. Nixon, Richard Nixon.
Richard Tricky Dicky.
Yeah.
I only met him.
His general attitude toward rural electric.
He
left the Hamill position.
Yes, that was the only good thing that he did. Is that he left Dave in as the administrator, and I know Dave was trying very hard to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
To make it work. I only met him once, and that's when he dedicated the Carl Munt Library here in Madison. Then, well, we all know what happened to him.
Yep. George McGovern.
Good friend. Got a picture of him up there with Virgin Eye.
Yeah.
One of the best friends you could ever wish for. He was, what should I say? To me, he was the statesman of Tom Daschle.
Mm-hmm.
He was more of a statesman than Tom was.
Yeah.
If I had anything that I would say was to the negative of George, is that he was too far ahead of the people. Mm-hmm. His vision for the future is now.
Yeah.
It was true when he was running for president.
Yeah.
But the really people didn't catch up with him.
Mm-hmm.
The people couldn't think of their mind what he was saying, and he was just crazy, Mm-hmm. He was making sense.
Yeah.
And of course I was down. We were down in Arizona when Tom got beat, and I was worried about Tom. I really was, and I told my friend down there. But we had to get a tire fixed, and so I was standing there just waiting, and there's a newspaper publisher retired from Pennsylvania. And he asked me where I was from, and I told him South Dakota. South Dakota, you bunch of idiots! What's the matter with you? Why, land, you got the leader of the Senate, and you dumped him out. What in the world is... Oh, every place I went, they just couldn't get over that we would dump the leader of the Senate. Minority or majority, didn't matter. And that had to be the dumbest thing the state ever done. Mm-hmm. That and the abortion law, but that's a different matter.
A couple of one-term senators, Jim Abourezk, who I think served a term in the House before he was elected.
I believe he did. He was one of those, what was it, 547? House Bill 547 that we had under Archie Grubrud. No, Frank Farrar. We had it under Frank Farrar. How could I forget that? And he pretty much ran on that ticket and got elected. Mm-hmm. And I liked him. I liked him real well. He was a good senator, but for some reason or other, he didn't care for it after he got in there.
Yeah. Jim Abner.
I got along real good with Jim. I was surprised that he got beat when he did, but I guess one of the things, of course, now, as far as I'm concerned, that we're in such a turmoil with the gas and the war and the crookedness, the corruption. It's getting pretty sad. I think when you really get to looking at it, it's pretty sad. We don't have that with our congressional delegation, but it's pretty bad, I think. To me, it's the worst political time in my history right now.
Jimmy Carter.
Didn't have much to do with him other than he appointed Bob Farragut as the administrator. But otherwise, I don't think he had any grudges against the rural electrification that I remember anyway.
There was a conflict. I'm not sure that it involved the rural electrification folks, but certainly with some of the public power folks over nuclear power.
Yes.
During that time.
Yeah.
Very controversial.
Yeah.
East River, when did East River start becoming interested in supporting alternative energy? And why do you feel like they have been more so than maybe some other rural electric entities in being outspoken on some of those things like ethanol?
Well, I don't know, but we when I was still managing, we had plans to build 3 wind generators at Huron. We'd built the line and everything else. over there by, I think it was around by Yale. And back then, Boeing's was going to build it. And to me, it just seemed like the logical thing to do. It was more logical to go that route than for each individual farmer to go through the cost and expense of putting in their own wind charger and then only getting reimbursed for fuel costs. And that was during the Carter years that we were working up there. And the reason they were interested in it was the tax. And and we got all of our wind data we got from SDSU. And that was the best place in the state that they came up with, was the area up there by Huron. And it went through, it fell through, because then Carter's out and tax breaks are over with, and there you go. So then Jeff picked it up, and of course built those two out there at Chamberlain. I was out to the dedication of those. And they're going to build more. And what did I hear them say? That eventually 20% of the energy may come from other sources. Yeah.
And you see some little ones like the two out at Howard.
Yeah, and Howard uses them. And of course they did build that one out there in the corner too, where that gas station is, but that was a used one that was never up. They finally took it out of there.
Yeah. There was another assault on the rural electric program during the Reagan administration. They wanted to, I think, sell the hydroelectric dams or dispose of them. You want to talk about that a little bit? Virgil did when I interviewed him.
Yeah, they were trying to do that. They wanted to privatize it.
Yeah.
You know, I guess I didn't feel like it was going to fly. That there was going to be too much opposition in the Congress for it. But it's just like now. It's just unbelievable that, for example, we got Australians now are going to buy out Northwestern Public Service Company. And I had a friend of mine ask me at coffee the other morning what I thought of it. And I said, it's not the Australians, it's not Northwestern, it's the theory of our country selling everything out to the world. And then it wasn't but a few days later, Bush announced that he had approved Dubai to buy out that plant that makes our tanks, isn't it? It scares the living daylights out of me, what we're doing. It really does. It's a few bucks for the short term. That's what it boils down to.
What year did you retire now?
1986, January 86.
Okay. Would you compare the situation as you see it in rural electrics now as compared to when you retired? Do you think things are strong today compared to that?
Oh, at least as far as East River is concerned, it certainly is. Yes, I don't know how Jeff can keep up with it, because he's got a terribly heavy burden, much heavier than what I had. But I hired him as a young engineer from SDSU, and he'd just gotten out of the Army. He and his wife, and they had 2 little children. And he's a brilliant mind, and you don't have to worry about his dedication to REA. And like Hanlon always used to say, Verge Hanlon, if he believes in cooperatives, I'll teach him the rest of it, you know. And of course, his dad Lee, from Marion, was the manager down there, one of the finest guys in the world. He died. I didn't know he died of cancer of melanoma, but he did. So he has got, it's a different world that he is living in as compared to what I was living in. We were basically just building power plants for rural loads and transmission lines. Now I think the biggest share of their construction budget is going to rural loads, but they're industrial loads more than farm.
Yeah, there's farms that are a lot fewer and further between them.
Yeah, except there's so many homes nowadays, at least down southeast here, that where they're building their homes in rural areas. And of course, in Sioux Falls, for example, everything south of 57th Street is in Lincoln County. And all that area is served by, well, it was served by Lincoln Union. And now, of course, they merged with Turner Hutch. And so, and Salem, the Cook Electric, my home co-op, they merged with Turner Hutch also.
Is Farragut's apartment building, is that in the rural
I don't even know where he lives.
He is down the south end of Sioux Falls.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. I'm trying to, I don't remember necessarily remember the address, but it's down.
Give me that top book.
This one?
Yeah. I can find it in a hurry. And I really don't know where Bob lives. I just saw him last week, Sunday. Virgin Artists were celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary and at their church out there, and they were there. Let's see, got to get to here, don't I? And Bob was there too, along with Jeff and Judy. But Rogan. He's an awful nice fellow. FGH.
Yeah, he was one of the first guys I interviewed, and then, of course, he serves on my advisory committee.
Yeah.
Along with Gene. Got lunch with Gene today.
Oh, do you? Yeah. Well, he was just sworn in Monday night.
Yep.
Oh, dear. Too far back. F-E. F-E-R. Yeah, he, I don't know how he's, oh, he'll make it all right. He'll make it all right. They don't have, now there's Bob Madeline, 515 Rolling Green Avenue. Don't tell me a damn thing. It is down on the south end down there. Okay.
Yeah. Darrell Moses was Senex president for a long time. Was down in that general vicinity.
Okay. He's in an apartment building, isn't he?
Darrell, Bob is.
Yeah.
Darrell's got a condominium.
I don't know why Gene took an interest in running for the city. I don't think, at least nothing has ever appeared to me that he had any interest in.
I think I was down here
City
interviewed
government.
him last fall, and it was like the day or so after the previous mayor had died.
Oh, after Royce died?
Yeah. But he didn't say anything about having an interest in running.
No, Royce worked for me too, you know, on staff.
Yeah.
And that was a sudden one. He called me just a few days before he died. I was in the hospital down at Sioux Falls, had a new hip put in. He didn't sound like he was hurting for anything then. Getting to some of the current situation, there's no question, I guess, that the country is in an energy crisis today. It kind of looks like what we thought we were in the early 1970s, although it's probably worse today than it was then. What do you think needs to be done in that regard? Have you thought about that at all? Oh, yeah. Every time I go to the gas pump. But I don't know if there's a solution to it. They interviewed the new CEO of Exxon this morning on NBC, and he just talked around everything. And certainly you're not going to get anything out of the administration. You're not getting anything out of Cheney or Bush. I remember years ago when John F. Kennedy was president, and I think it was the steel companies that were going to jack up the prices of steel, and the president come on and just let them know it. But you do that, and you'll pay the price, and they backed off. But these guys ain't gonna do nothing. They talk about we haven't had any new refineries built in 20, 30 years. Why? They never say why.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they'll give you the environmental thing,
Oh,
and I'm sure that's true. But honest to God, they can condemn your home so that McDonald's can put in a drive-in hamburger joint.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 on that stupid thing.
Yep.
You know, I can see condemning. Well, of course, we went through it, although we didn't do very much of it. In the 30-some years I was at the East River,
Mm-hmm.
We had lots of condemnation resolutions.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong on that, but they never went to court. Matter of fact, when I first became acting manager, we had one in Minnesota,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on the stand, and the judge says, "You know, you guys can settle this without me being here," and we did. We both sat down for lunch and
Mm-hmm.
we settled it. But that was for the public use. We're building transmission line for the public use. We're not building transmission line for someone to make a profit off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're condemning your house to build a
Yeah.
shopping center.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just goes against my grain.
Yeah. What do you think? Did it used to seem like the private utilities, who were always in conflict, certainly with public power and the rural electrics to a degree at least, that things got so ruthless as they did in the case of the Enron thing out in California. You know, holding them up for the way they did here. That was what, about 7-8 years ago now.
Yeah.
It was during the Clinton administration.
Yeah, right towards the end of it.
Yep.
Yep.
So you retired in 1986. What have you been doing since then?
Not much. No, I've been busy, but I haven't had any jobs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I haven't had any jobs. I mainly right now I've been enjoying grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we do, and we probably won't anymore, but we've been going down to Arizona winter time.
Yeah, okay.
During the winters down there, but I think probably we spent our last one.
Mm-hmm.
The trip is getting longer.
Yeah. Yeah. You driving down or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What kind of advice would you give someone today if somebody who wanted to get into the rural electric?
It's a good place to go.
Mm-hmm.
Be aware that you're going to have some tremendous challenges.
Yeah. You consider yourself an optimist or a pessimist, or a
I'd like to
combination?
say an optimist.
Yeah.
I think things right now, in my opinion, on the federal level, it can only get better.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've got to be hitting rock bottom pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, gosh, I do watch CNN quite a bit in their late afternoons, evenings, and Wolf Blitzer and that crew, and to me it's educational and interesting. But any time, in my opinion, that you have one party controlling the House, the Senate, and the White House, and I don't care which party it is,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have corruption.
Mm-hmm.
It just the minority party can't even call for an oversight hearing, for goodness sake.
Yep. Yep. And you might also add the court system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think
we didn't talk about.
No, I think that's it. No. Well, I say I haven't done anything. I've been busy constantly.
Mm-hmm.
But I do woodworking. I take care of this place. And we have a place out to the lake I take care of. I play
Mm-hmm.
golf and fish, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to enjoy it.
Okay.
And other than arthritis, I'm enjoying it.
We've been visiting with Loren Zingmark. Thank you for participating in the Cooperative Legacy Project.